Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Dia, and today I'm sharing with you my diary entry for the week of September 3rd through 9th. Today is Saturday, September 9th. It's been a long day. I was going to skip this diary entry this week because I just was not feeling it. But I did finish quite a few books this week. More than I thought I was going to finish, but yeah, when I decided that I wasn't going to do this video, I had only finished one thing. So I was like, oh, no problem. I'm going to skip the diary entry this week. Yeah, I finished a couple more things. So instead of waiting and making next week's video super long, I thought I might as well just get it done. It's about 7 o'clock in the evening tonight. This is the latest that I filmed for a while. I've been filming for about 4 hours, I think, now. It's been a day. So the only thing I have to share with you today are reviews of the books that I finished this week. I did put in a couple of rows into my Mostly Ghostly, but I only put in like 2 rows, so it's not really enough to show you progress. So I'm going to hold that off. So I think with the books that I have to talk to you about today, this should be on the shorter side. So let's get into it. The first thing I'm going to talk to you about today is actually not a book that I have finished. So for the Year in LD Readathon, I think I mentioned this to you in the last diary entry, we needed to pick a path. So every month there's a prompt and you get to pick your path every month. And I'm kind of like on that path right now where I know what I want to earn for my character at the end of this year, and so I need to read certain prompts in order to do that. And so September is kind of the month where it locks you in on a path. And so the prompt for September was to read a dark academia book, and I had decided on Donna Tartt's Secret History. So this is a story about a guy who goes to college and gets enamored with the Greek department. They study ancient Greek. It wasn't Greek mythology like I thought. They study all factions of ancient Greek. So language, history, art, literature, all the different facets. And he wants to get into that department, but he can't. The professor is really, really picky on his students. So he needs to find a way to finagle himself into that department, and eventually he does. But at the very beginning of this book, there is a prologue that tells you that one of the students from the department is dead. And it also tells you kind of what happens immediately after you find out that one of the characters is dead. So you already know that one of these characters is dead. You already know who is there at the scene where this person has died, but you don't know why. So I had always thought that this was going to be an interesting book for me. When I had first seen the layout for the Year in LD Readathon, when I saw that this path that I wanted to be on had to read a dark academia book in September, this was the book that I had said immediately, okay, I'll be reading this in September. Unfortunately, this book was very boring for me. I am not the type of person that likes to be told what happens and then be told after the fact how you got there. This is one of those books. And for me, the chapters that I did read from this book weren't interesting at all. Like, the interactions that our main character has with these students from the Greek department wasn't interesting. They weren't doing anything interesting. And all of the intrigue for me kind of died in the first pages of the prologue because I don't care now what happens. If you had made this main character more interesting, like maybe, I don't know, made his journey into getting into the Greek department a little more interesting, maybe that might have hooked me in a little bit more. I did only read 2 chapters. However, that was 93 pages of this book, and it was painful for me to read these. I kept falling asleep. It was so boring. I know this is such a popular book. I hear people talk its praises all the time, but I can't find any interest in this story. So right now I have it marked as a DNF. I did not finish this book. I may try to get on the audiobook wait list for this and see if that will interest me anymore, but at this point I'm just like, I am not interested in what happens with these characters. Do I want to put myself through hours of reading boring material just to find out what led to the death of the character in the very first 2 pages of the prologue? I don't think I do. This book is just over 500 pages. But I'm not interested at all in what's going on. So I'm DNFing this one. So what that means is that I had to pick up something else to fit the Dark Academia prompt for the Year in Eldia Readathon. So I scoured through the Goodreads list of top Dark Academia books, and a lot of them that were on that list that I had interest in, I had already read. The ones that I had marked to read weren't really catching my attention at the moment. And so I went on to Google and I looked up Dark Academia book recommendations, and Penguin Random House had a blog up that had a few recommendations on it. And one of the books on that list was One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. And I thought, let me try that one, because the first thing I saw was The Breakfast Club. And The Breakfast Club is definitely a nostalgic movie for me. Now, the summary said The Breakfast Club meets Pretty Little Liars. I didn't watch Pretty Little Liars. I have no knowledge of what happens in Pretty Little Liars, but I figured with The Breakfast Club kind of setup, it also kind of told you there were these 5 characters and what kinds of things those characters were in. It definitely gave me Breakfast Club vibes. So I thought with that, it would be a much more interesting read for me. So this story is about 5 students, high school students, who meet in detention. And they all seem to be in detention for reasons that they don't understand. But shortly after they arrive in detention, one of these students who has a gossip blog or gossip app that kind of tells all the school's dirty secrets on it dies. And so the story kind of follows the investigation of what happened to that student, the fallout from the things that were posted on that app, and things like that. And so I can tell you immediately off the bat that I was really intrigued just because of that whole Breakfast Club vibe. You really get into what happens in this story 2 or 3 chapters in. These chapters are all multiple POV, so it's from different characters from these kids in detention. And so it took me a little bit to kind of get my bearings, because when you're thrown into a setting like that where you're unfamiliar with these characters and yet you have titles, chapter titles that are these characters' names and you don't know who they are, it takes me at least a little bit of time. So it took a little bit of time, but once I got familiarized with all of the characters and their names, it definitely made everything easier. And I can tell you that I was so engrossed in what was going on in this book that I blew through the first 50 pages like it was nothing, which is a stark contrast to my experience with The Secret History. So I definitely knew at that point, my very first sit down with this book, that I made the right decision. Because obviously, just with what had happened with my reading experience, it was much better with this book than it was with The Secret History. So I ended up finishing this book very early this morning. And it was really, really good. I enjoyed it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I think that everything that had happened was very interesting in the way that it had come out. I thought that the culprit was definitely someone I had in the back of my mind, but I hadn't really settled on them as the person. But as, you know, you're reading through, you're definitely always having that question in the back of your mind of, one of us is lying. Which one is it? And then you get introduced to all of these other characters, right? Who are kind of connected to these characters. And then you start thinking, is it them? And that's the kind of thing that I really enjoy with mysteries, is thinking about that. That whole like thought process really gets me interested in what's going on in the book. And if I don't have that, it's like there's nothing for me to like strive to try to understand or be invested in. And this book definitely gave me that. I was definitely thinking about it a lot. I was thinking about what was happening with these characters, and just like being gobsmacked about like the things that were happening to them and why the cops were doing certain things. And you know, all of these characters come from different walks of life. They've never really associated with each other until now, where they're all thrown into this situation and they're all in the same situation with each other, all being scrutinized. They all have secrets. And it was just a really, really fun read. Now, I know this is the first book in a trilogy. However, I believe the trilogy is either a like companion trilogy, or like the second book follows other characters at that school and maybe something else happens. I don't see how this story can even continue, because it is wrapped up here. It's, at least I'm pretty sure it is. That's the general feel that I get. It didn't leave me on any cliffhangery feelings or anything like that. So I definitely think this particular one can be read as a standalone, but I know this is part of a trilogy. So I'm interested to see what the second book in this trilogy is about, and I'll definitely be reading that sometime. So that is the most recent book I finished. Also this week I finished my reread of Guilty Pleasures by Laurell K. Hamilton. So this is the first book in the Anita Blake series, and Anita Blake is a necromancer, but she's also a vampire hunter. And at the beginning of this book, she gets hired by one of the most powerful vampires, is it in the city? Yes, in her city, to investigate the recent bout of vampire murders. Now, Anita is necromancer first, vampire hunter kind of second. She works for a company that's called Animators Inc., and so they're all like necromancers. But like I said, this was a reread for me. I listened to some of this on audiobook. I read some of it physically. I can tell you that I don't remember anything that happened from my read 6 years ago. So reading this time was pretty much all new material for me. It felt like I was reading the book for the first time. The narration on the audiobook wasn't great. It was acceptable, but it wasn't spectacular. Like, I wouldn't feel the need to listen to more in audio, but it was nice to have, because it meant that I could combo read this, meaning that I could read some during lunch and then read some more like later in the evening or something. And so, yeah, I read this 6 years ago. When I read it this time, I didn't remember anything that happened. So it felt like a fresh read for me. It was an okay story. I wasn't particularly intrigued by anything that happened. I wasn't particularly affected by anything that happened in here. But I'm interested to see what happens in the next one, because now that we've got a firm understanding of what Anita can do, how she works her cases and things like that, I'm interested to see if maybe the second book will offer me a little bit more as far as, you know, something a little bit more mysterious or something a little bit more interesting. I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't really intrigued by anything that happened in here. It wasn't entertaining story for the most part. I still kept my 3-star rating. But yeah, it was okay. Definitely need to read the second one soon so that I can figure out whether or not I want to continue with that series, because that series is still ongoing. It is still ongoing. There are over 30 books, I think, now in that series, and I have, I think, 15 of them, which I didn't pay more than $1 for. So, yeah, definitely need to go to the second one, because I didn't do that the first time I read it, and now I've had to reread that book in order to continue. So, I want to make sure that I continue while this series is fresh in my head. And so I do have plans on doing that soon. I had read this for my TBR game, so that's great. I got that checked off. So I checked off my year in Eldia. I checked off one of my TBR game books. And then the last thing I needed to check off this week was for the Sufferathon Hotel Readathon. So the prompt was to read a book in the same genre as your lowest rated book in the last 2 years. We also had to read a certain amount of minutes or hours every day this week, depending on our role. So the role was an odd number for me, so I only had to read an hour every day this week, which is great because I always listen to my audiobook for an hour anyway. And so because I was heavily reading mysteries in the last couple years, my lowest rated read was a mystery, so that was great for me. It's a genre that I read all the time, so that was great. And so I decided to pick up Manner of Death. This is the first book in the Manner of Death series by Samon, and this has art by Yukari Umemoto, published by Yen Press, rated older teen. So this is a manga that is following a coroner, who is this guy here, and he gets called to the scene of a death, and in looking at the body, even though it looks like she had committed suicide, he sees signs of homicide. And so he decides that he is going to investigate a little further. And when he is at his home, he gets accosted by someone saying that he needs to classify the death as a suicide. And if he doesn't, bad things will happen. And so he is even more intrigued now to look into this. But he doesn't know who he can tell, because the person that assaulted him told him, if you tell anyone, you know, things will happen. But he ends up confiding in his friend, a good friend, who is an attorney. And after confiding in that attorney goes missing. And so now he doesn't know what to do. And he ends up teaming up with this guy, who is the boyfriend of the victim. And I think that's all I'm going to say for right now. This is a BL story, so take what you will from that. But I really enjoyed this. It was mysterious. It gave me those police procedural feels. I will say that this volume is really thick, so there is a lot that happens in here, and you pretty much figure out if the death was a suicide or a homicide within this volume. And I think for a lot of people that might be like, well, why is there more? But you've also got to remember that this is a BL, so there is more in that like department. Plus there are a few other things that have come to light during their course of investigation. So there are still things that need to be like figured out, even though kind of the main question at the very beginning of this manga, you kind of already know the answer to. So I believe this is a duology. If I remember correctly, the original only had 2 installments of the light novel. So this is an adaptation of a Thai BL light novel. I believe we only got the manga though. We didn't get a translation of the light novels, so I'm wondering if there might be more. Because I find that when there is a light novel edition, the light novel definitely gives you more than the manga can, because the manga has to condense down the story so that it can put in all of the drawings, and your speech bubbles are only so big, right? I'd be interested to read the light novel of this, because what happened in here was definitely interesting. I believe certain things can be built upon, filled in a little bit more, but this was entertaining enough for me. I feel satisfied with what I read. I gave this 4 stars, really enjoyed it. Will definitely be continuing on to the next installment. So I highly recommend this one if you're interested in like police procedural type stories, and maybe a little bit of BL romance also. So this is really good. I really enjoyed that. So I was able to complete my prompt for the Suffer-a-thon Hotel Readathon, but I also had chosen this for the Season-a-thon Academy Readathon for the prompt where we had to read a new to you author. So this is definitely a new to me author. And so that checked off one of my classes for the Season-a-thon Academy. So that's everything that I have read this week. I will say that I will be DNFing one more thing this week. So I'm actually going to DNF the Suffer-a-thon Hotel Readathon. The more I thought about it, the whole theme of that readathon is to suffer. And I thought, you know, how bad could that be? But I have enjoyed like being in the Discord and seeing everybody like talk about it and stuff. But for myself, I don't want to be suffering in my birthday month, if you know what I mean. I think this would have been a great readathon to participate in like, say, January, maybe, or, you know, any of the other summer months, but not my birthday month. I thought it would be like a fun notion to like participate in, and the first prompts were fine. They were easy for me to get in, but when I listened to the prompt for this week and the challenge, I just wasn't up to it. I just don't want to be suffering in my birthday month. So I am enjoying all of the skits that I have seen so far from the hosts. I, like I said, have enjoyed seeing everybody kind of making tongue-in-cheek comments about suffering or trying to like circumvent stuff, and it's just not for me. It's not for me right now. It would have been. I would have definitely been up for the challenge if it was any other time of the year, but not my birthday month. So I am bowing out of the Suffer-a-thon Hotel Readathon. I will enjoy, though, seeing all the hosts do their skits and things, because I think part of my enjoyment and my intrigue of this readathon was seeing those, because they really make you feel like you're at this hotel to suffer. And it is hilarious. But the notion is just not for me, not in my birthday month. So I'm going to bow out of the Suffer-a-thon Hotel Readathon. But it was interesting, and I'll continue to watch all of the host prompts videos that come out and kind of continue to lurk in the Discord and see what everybody's up to, see how they're faring with their challenges and things like that. But yeah, I'm going to silently check out of the Suffer-a-thon Hotel. But that's pretty much all I've got for you this week. Because I finished One of Us is Lying, I finished everything that I was currently reading. So I get to pick something new to read tonight, and I don't know what that will be. I should probably pick up my other TBR game book, just so that I can get it out of the way early in the month, or earlier. But we'll see what I'm feeling like this evening. So yeah, yeah, that's everything I have for you today. Let me know down in the comments below what you've been up to. Have you been participating in any readathons? And if so, let me know which ones down in the comments below. I've also already chosen my October readathon, so I'm prepping for those. Bazaar, if you're watching, I'm kind of hoping there'll be an announcement for the Manga Freakathon soon. Let me know, okay? I'm kind of counting that one already as a readathon, even though there hasn't been an announcement. But anyway, let me know if there are any readathons that you are participating in October. I almost said August. October. I'd love to know. I'll be participating in the Camp Crystal Lake readathon and the Manga Freakathon. Hint, hint. For October. And then my friends Lee over at Dark Roots Creations and Storm from Storm Reads and Elizabeth from Soul Stained Ink are hosting Hollow Tween, which is like a middle grade young adult Halloween themed readathon for the month of October. So I'm definitely going to try to pull some of those types of books as well to read during the month. But let me know which readathons you're already looking at for October, because it's always fun to know. And if nothing else and you'd just like to let me know that you were here, if you could leave me a jack-o'-lantern emoji down in the comments below, that would be greatly appreciated and would really help me out, and that will do it for me today. So I hope you're all doing great. I hope you're all safe and healthy. And until next time, take care and smile always. Bye.